Hey designer, Alex here, welcome to the channel, and in today's video we are going to create some 3D interactions in Adobe XD using a website that we are going to create in this tutorial. So this is how it's going to look like. What we have right here is the sign in button with a hover, and you can see this nice transition. We also have the same transition down here, as you can see, but this is the important bit. At the moment, Adobe XD does not support 3D hover effects, but I'm hoping that it will come in the months to come. So if you check out the channel at a later time, and I will also update this video in the video description, saying that I have created another separate tutorial with this hover effect, but at the moment we have to utilize tap trigger. So how that's going to look like: once the user taps, these turn into 3D and they change places. So if I tap back one more time, this is how it's going to look like. So we're going to create this in today's video, and we are also going to have this nice glass morphism effect to these cards. So without any further ado, let's get started. Before we jump into the tutorial, make sure to check out Patreon link down below if you want to get this same file to follow along. If not, you can use any other file you want. You can create it by just following this tutorial and using any other image, any other link that you might want. But if you want to have exactly the same file I did right here, then make sure to go to the Patreon and support the channel that way if you want to get it. Also, this dashboard screen is taken from my design, which I have created previously here on the channel. I will link it down below as well. And if you want to check out the course in which that is created, which is over 20 hours long, I will link that as well down below with a massive discount just for my followers. So now let's go back to the video and I will show you how you can create this animation. Alright, so this is how the file looks like, and this is just the starting file. As I said, you can create any kind of file you want. This is just the one I started with. I already gone ahead and created these color tokens, because if I at any point send this to the developers, they will easily understand these colors rather than just hex code, and they are much easier to read and to apply in code than just using hex codes. I also have character styles. Poppins is the font I'm using, which is the free Google font, and I will link it down below. One is 90, one is 24. I also have these pre-prepared components, and I will show you how to create them. And I also have this nice arrow animation. Also, artboard is not purely white. If I click right here, it's F8, 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 just to facilitate that transition, which is going to come later. And finally, we have 12 columns with a gutter width of 80, column width 64, and margins are linked on either side at 136. So basic stuff out of the way, let's now get started. And the first thing I'm going to do is to create this some sort of a logo. So clarify is what I'm going to call it, and let's see, perhaps maybe I can create it to be 50, Poppins bold. So let's quickly apply this one, make sure it's left aligned, position it to be at 50. I will use plain white, and I will position it somewhere around here. Actually, let's use this just so that we can get things done more quickly. And just so that you guys can see it, I'm going to use 24 for this one, and I'm going to write something like products. I'm going to make it center aligned. I'm going to use this one, say company, like that. I'm going to position it somewhere roughly around here. So somewhere around 110, I think it's going to work fine. Next, I'm going to use pricing, like that, and 110, and finally this is going to be data, because it's data-driven website after all. I'm going to call these nav items. Let's go back to the layer panel, nav items, like that. And now let's go ahead and create our button, which is going to come right here, and then we're going to arrange it right here, and then later on come back and reorganize some of these things. So I'm going to duplicate this one. I'm going to go back, make it 90 like so, and I'm going to write in just some basic text. Let me paste it from my original design. So data-driven solutions for your business. Next, I'm going to use one of these, go like this, Just because I'm a bit lazy and I don't want to write in multiple times, let's position the logo at the top. And I'm going to go right here and I'm going to apply this because I'm going to use the left align function. And now let's position it, I don't know, for example, 50 from this one. That's fine. Next, I'm going to copy and paste the text I originally used. And finally, I'm going to duplicate one more time. Learn more. And I'm going to use that text and it can be center aligned, for example. And this is the text I'm going to use for my button. Now for the button, I can go right in and drag and drop my button, but I'm going to show you how you can actually create it. So once again, I'm going to create a rectangle which is 3 columns wide, for example, because I found that 3 columns wide is just enough for our main button, and we're going to narrow it down to 2 columns wide for this top button because it's going to write in a login at the top. So less text equals a narrower button in our case. So let's see for our button. In this case, we can use this color. Let's start with that. So primary color. And now I can change this to white. And let's see, maybe I can position it in the center, but it doesn't matter because it's not going to be in the center later. Let's see, for the corner radius, we can use something like 10, and you can use, I'll go without border. You can use drop shadow if you want, but I'm not going to do that at the moment. What I will do is drag and drop my arrow inside. I'll position it like so. Make sure it's 30, and now I'm going to position them in the center like so. I'm going to go ahead and group these. I'm going to first call this BTN BG for the button BG, like that. And then I'm going to select my arrow, learn more, and button BG. I'm going to group them, call it main BTN, like that. And then because I already have this component created right here, as you can see it, I will go ahead and delete it from here just so that we can have one right here. Now, in terms of this arrow, if I click right here and show you the hover effect, you can see how it looks like. So it goes from here to here. So what I've done right here is if I open this up, you can see that I have 3 lines, and you can create this line simply by using the pen tool, click to endpoint, click escape to exit. Then you can round it right here, and you can use something like 3, for example, and I think I did just that. Yes, right there. And borderline is white in my case. What I did then is simply duplicated it, so Control D, and you can use this top one, and let me unzoom a little bit. You can hover right here and hold your shift key and rotate it to 45 degrees. You can, let's go ahead and delete this one. I will go this one which we rotated, I will duplicate that and simply click right here to flip it down below. Then you can connect them at this same point, and then you can bring this one down in the center, position it right here. Now for the clicked state, or rather for the hover state, this is going to be extended and this is going to be collapsed. So now that you know how to create this arrow, let me show you how the animation works actually. So you can see that at this state, which is our default state, this bottom line is collapsed all the way to here. So if I go ahead and extend it, you can see, so I just collapsed it right here and I left these 2 lines right here. And for the hover state, what I did is I simply extended this line to the right and moved these 2 lines to the right to follow as well, and once again to meet in the middle. So if I click right here, you can see that. So once again, this line, I extended it to the right and I simply moved these 2 lines to meet right here at the end. So that's our hover state. Now hit Control K to create this as a component, so this whole button. And what I'm going to do is create a hover state for it. Inside of our hover state, let's go ahead and change our arrow to the hover, like so. And I'm also going to change my button BG to this primary hover. So now we have this distinction for the hover button as well. What I'm going to do next is hit Control D, and I'm going to call this log in BTN, like so. And I'm going to position it right here. Next, I'm going to use these, and I'm going to use a rectangle, like so. I'm going to select rectangle and these, click right here to position them in the center between our logo and our button. But what I should actually do is start working on my button first. So we need to narrow it down. First things first, let's type in log in like that. And I'm going to make sure to set it to 30, for example. Then I'm going to change my button, then extend it to somewhere around here, for example. Now I'm going to hit Ctrl+C to copy it, go back to my default state, open everything up, go back to my, hit Ctrl+V to paste it, and then simply delete old ones, bring back this new one, and simply set the arrow back to the default state, and that's basically it. What you can also do is move the text, and I should actually do that like so. So hit Ctrl+C in the default state, go back to the hover state, then delete this old one, paste this new one, and then simply set the arrow here to hover. So in the default state, they are in the center. In the hover state, it just moves right here. So let me bring this up to the top. And now let's organize these two. So this is already set. Extend this to here. Now select these two, click right here. I will delete this one. And what I did right there is I want to group these now that I have them. So login button, nav items, and hit Ctrl+G to group all of them. I'm going to call it nav, and I'm going to select all of these, hit Ctrl+G, call it text, for example, just so that I know what everything is. And we forgot to set these spacing, so let's see, maybe we can have it be at 50, so same like this one. And what I'm going to do finally is click right here to create another rectangle, go all the way up to the button, for example. And I'm going to select my rectangle and my text, click right here just to make sure that everything is dead in the center. So now that that's completed, what we can do is hit preview just to see if our hover effects work as they should. And because this is already set to hover, I will change it back to default state. Now let's go back. This works, but I think it's way too fast in my opinion. So what I can do is go to prototype and select my button obviously and go right here. I'll choose ease in out, and instead of 0.3 I'll go to 0.6, and I will also jump in right here just to check, because it's a linked component, because this is a main component, this is our linked component or a child component. What we did right here for the main component, it already transitioned that to this child component. So because we hit 0.6, it's already 0.6 right here. So now if I hit my preview, you can see it's much slower and it's much more pleasing to the eye. And I really like how that looks like. What we're going to do next is create that background shape. And if I hit preview on my original design, just to show you, we're going to create this nice background shape which goes all the way to here. Now I can just copy and paste it, but I want to show you how you can create it yourself. So what we can do is click right here somewhere below the bottom of our artboard, so somewhere around here, then simply click to create, for example, 3 points, then click somewhere outside of here, hold your shift key and simply close off your shape. Then double click on this one, double click on this one, and double click on this one to make them editable paths. And now, as you can see, we have these nice curves which follow our design wherever we want. And I can, for example, position it right here, and I want it to be somewhere around here, just so that people can see my main text a little bit better. So somewhere around here, for example, I think it works well, something like this. And now for this top one, you can obviously extend it, you can bring it down or up, do whatever you want with it. But for example, let's say that I just want this nice subtle curve, because we're going to introduce the shapes here in a second. So I'm going to position it right there and call it BG shape, for example, or background shape, or whatever you want to call it basically. So now that we have that in place, what I'm going to do is drag and drop my image. So I already have my image prepared. I will drag and drop it in place. But before I do that, first let's go ahead and close this shape like that. I'll position it to the back like that. Everything looks fine. Something like that. I think it looks good. So now let's select it and try that one more time. So I'm going to drag and drop my image inside. I'm going to position it somewhere around here, for example. And you can also hold your shift key and nudge it however you want. I think this works well, but I will actually choose another image, this one. Drag and drop it, and you can find these blurs online, or if you want to use this exact image, then head on over to the Patreon, support the channel, and you are going to be able to get the same image I'm using. So what we're going to do is actually mask it. Hit mask, and if you don't know how to mask, select both of these layers, hit Shift Control M on your keyboard. I'll position it right here to the back. And finally, what I'm going to do is make some tweaks and some changes. So first things first, I will hit 4 on my keyboard to lower this blur down to 40%. I will remove my border from my shape. And on our blur, what we can do is introduce another background blur. And what we can do there is, for example, 80, 50, and 20 to make it nice and subtle and to make it stand out just a little bit. Now, because this is masked, you can access it at any point. Simply hit P on your keyboard to access the pen tool. You can click on your main point, for example, and then you can access all of these points, and then you can edit them at will if you want to. So now that that's completed, and let me hit Control Z one more time. Now that that's completed, what we can do is move on, and I will show you how to create these shapes. So what I have right here is mobile content and web content. So I will drag and drop my content inside just so that you can see what I'm doing. Sorry, let me do that one more time. So this is my web content, this is my mobile content, and this is how they look like. So basically this is taken from my online course, which I told you at the beginning of this video. If you want to check it out, you can. A link will be down in the description below with a massive discount if you want to follow it. And I will not recreate this just for the time's sakes, but what I can do is simply drag web and mobile. I can drag them in like so. I'm going to position them just below my text, like so. Then what I can do is I can set them like this. So I will position this to be right here to the right with our grid. I'm going to position this to be somewhere around here, for example. And then where it says Michael, maybe Shift 1, 2, 3 to position 30, and finally align them like so. Now let me quickly show you how I created this glass morphism effect. So basically we have this content, and I can hide it for the mobile, for example, and you can see the whole point of this glass morphism is to introduce this glass effect with a blur background. So how I did that, and by the way, it's basically exactly the same for these two. Once I have created this first one, I'm gonna head right click, copy, and then click on this one, right click, paste appearance, and it shows exactly the same as this one. So in order to create it, what you need to do is simply use a shape. So let's go ahead and hide the web so I can show you exactly what I did right here. So you can create your shape. I did, for example, 10. For the border, I selected white color like so. And then what I did, if I show you on the original example, as you can see, the fill color is the gradient. So if you go back to here, choose fill, linear gradient, and you can, for example, position lighter point here, darker point here. And the key here is to have them both be white like this. Now this darker point, let it be, for example, 40%. This lighter point, let it be, for example, 20%. And now you're going to have this. Then comes the blur. You can see that the border is lowered down to 25% just so it doesn't stick out too much. So you can go down lower to 25%. When it comes to shadow, what I did is 10, 10, 20 for the blur and 10 for the opacity. So you can do the same, include the shadow. 10, 10, 20, and 10% for the opacity. And finally, we have background blur. So how much of this blur you actually want. So the amount is 15, brightness is 0, and the opacity is 100. And then basically you get to this part. And as I said, I just used this mobile content and this web content from my dashboard design from my online course. Now that they are both in the middle and in the center like this, what you can do is you can actually go ahead and add some texture here to the background. You can also add a different color for the artboard itself if you want to stand out even more like this. But I found this to be just good enough for F8, F8, F8. So this nice and subtle gray color. Finally, what I'm going to do before I start animating is turn this to white. Click here, turn to white, and just make sure that they are all centered like this. Then I'll make sure that they are 40 from the top like this, and I think that works just fine. Let's hit preview before we start animating. That looks good. As you can see, this nice and subtle transition works really well. And now finally comes the time for the 3D transition in this one. Now to do that, hit Ctrl D on your artboard to create a copy. And what we are going to do is simply click right here. And I will simply hit on this one, which is the Y rotation. I'll go to -22. Click on this one, -22 on the Y rotation. I'll position this to the center of this. Make sure that they are centered. And finally, you can nudge this, for example, to here if you want to, just so that you show a bit more details to this one. Now you can go even further into this and you can extend these text, you can extend all of these, but it's really advanced and it's really for another tutorial. I just wanted to show you how you can quickly do this one. Now finally comes the time of prototyping. So what you can do is hit prototype right here. As I said, sadly, it does not support hover effect yet. So before we hit prototype, I will simply go ahead and group these, call them cards, like that. Now select these two, hit Ctrl G, call them cards. Because we are going to do auto animate, it's really important that all your layers are named correctly. You can exit the 3D view from here. And now let's go to the prototype. I'll click right here, drag and drop it to here, use my tab trigger, auto animate. And let's see what we can do for the transition. We can create easy in out, and let's say 0.8 seconds. I think it's going to work just fine for our case. Click right here, drag and drop this blue arrow. It's going to copy exactly the same settings that you have created. Now finally, let's preview the finished design, see how it's done. So hover effect works just fine. Same thing for here. And now if we click, you can see this organizing into place, rotating in 3D, looking really nice. And finally, this glass morphism effect. If I click one more time, you can see that this text fades into deep blur and then shows right here at the back and right here at the top. So I think it really does fit this style of website really nicely. And I think this white navigation and white logo is really what's going to pop against this nice background. So one more time. And as I said, you can play around with all of these different elements and create basically whatever you want and achieve whichever result you want. Thank you for watching this video, and I really hope you got some value in it. If you did, make sure to press that like button. I upload new videos every single week on design, passive income techniques, motivation, and more. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.